Using the correct needle, thread, and bobbin when sewing is very important in producing quality stitches for your projects. In this section, I'll discuss the basics of these three components that will be used in your machine. I will advise you that using inexpensive needles, thread, and bobbins can also have an unfavorable effect on your machine. It may also give you unnecessary headaches. Low-quality needles, thread, and bobbins can cause a multitude of errors while sewing, including skipped stitches, bad tension, thread breakage, thread wadding in the bobbin, and so many more errors I hope you never encounter. The needle you choose for your project will be based on the fabric you use. There are many different types and sizes of needles, and there are many brands to choose from. I will be using Schmetz brand needles. Unless I specify otherwise, I will be using Schmetz Universal Needles 130/705H, size 80/12. That is a lot of numbers, but let me explain what they mean. The 130/705H is just a classification of the needle type. 130/705H is most commonly known as a household needle or home sewing needle type. However, the H does not mean household. It's actually an abbreviation for a German word which means with scarf. The entire meaning of 130/705H classification is flat shank with scarf. Okay, so what's a flat shank and what's a scarf? Well, let's first look at the anatomy of a needle. Let's look at the front of the needle here. This here is the tip. And the hole here in the needle is called the eye. This very short area between the tip and the eye is known as the point. Later, you'll be inserting your thread through the eye. Now, along the top of the needle, beginning at the eye, this is called the groove, and you can actually put your fingernail in there in the groove and run it along that from the eye up to the top. This is a kind of a guide for the thread to follow down to the eye. Along the sides here, next to the groove, that is called the blade. And then up here, at the widest part of the needle, is called the shank. And this very top part here is called the butt. So now let's turn this needle over and have a look at the back. So if you see here along the shank, along the back, it's flat, kind of like it's been shaved off. This is the flat shank in the description. This flat part of the shank also helps you to insert the needle correctly. The flat shank side is the back of the needle. In most home sewing machines, the back side of the needle faces to the back of the machine. Now let's follow the blade down to the eye. Notice that the blade does not have a groove, but just above the eye you can feel the needle cut away. If you turn the needle to the side, you can see the area more clearly. Here, it cuts away. This is called the scarf. The scarf area allows the bobbin thread to catch the needle thread. So now, knowing the anatomy of a needle clarifies the meaning of the needle classification, flat shank with scarf, which is most commonly used in home sewing machines. Needle sizes range from 60/8 to 120/19, smallest to largest. And if you remember, I will be using 80/12, which is a medium-sized needle. The first number before the slash is the diameter of the needle blade. The second number is the American sizing number established by the Singer Sewing Company. If you understand fabric weights, then you'll understand that 60/8, being the smallest size, would be used for very light or sheer fabrics such as chiffon or voile, while 120/19, being the largest size, would be for heavy fabrics such as twill, canvas, or denim. Also, in regards to the needle size, the eye of the needle size changes as well. A smaller needle has a smaller eye, and a larger needle has a larger eye. which means you will need to use the appropriate size thread for your project. I will be using a medium weight muslin fabric, so I'll be using a size 80/12 needle. Understand that the needle will make a hole in your fabric when sewing. So if you use a large needle on lightweight fabrics, it will make a large hole, which will not make a quality seam. Also, using a small needle on heavy fabrics may not sew through all the way and may break the needle. For more information about needles, please visit the Learning Center at Schmetz Needles, www.schmetzneedles.com. Okay, so let's talk about the industrial needles. Let's first compare the home sewing needle to the industrial needle. This one here is the home needle, and this one here is the industrial needle. The main difference is that the home needle has a flat shank here, and the industrial needle has no flat side to it. So you'll need to refer back to the machine orientation for the industrial machine for installing the industrial needle. The other slight difference is, if you remember, I talked about the scarf. The scarves are slightly different. So the industrial needle has a slightly longer scarf here, just above the eye of the needle, whereas the home needle has just a slightly shorter scarf. And that's really the main difference. Know that you cannot swap the two out. You cannot use a home needle for the industrial machine, and you cannot use an industrial needle for the home machine. So just to be clear. So what are you looking for when you purchase the industrial sewing machine needles? So this here is what I have purchased. And again, I'm using the Schmetz brand. And we see here I have the size. It says size 12, and M is actually, remember, the home machine says 80/12. This is the European sizing system, and then the size 12 is the American sizing system. So these again are size 12, and this is what the size I'll be using for all of the exercises, unless I let you know beforehand. The other markings that you're going to find when you're asking for these, you're either going to ask them dB/1, and this little X here on all these numbers actually reads as by, not X. So dB/1, or they may say 16/231. So these two sets of numbers are predominantly what you're going to find in the industry. However, your sewing machine dealer really should know what system your machine uses. Now, there are differences between these needles. Now, I'm going to actually show you a picture of what I have got here, the information that you need, because there are several different styles or types of needles that you need to be aware of when working with your industrial needles that not a lot of people know about. Okay, so this is a printout of actually a magazine of needles, but it's different than what I'm using. So you can still see the 80/12, that's the size. So down here it will say dB/1 or whatever the needle system is, and then SPI. And that SPI does not mean stitches per inch. SPI in this case means acute round point. That means that the top of the needle is slightly round. It has a very pointed round edge, which could be used for very fine woven fabrics. And the reason you would want that for very fine woven fabrics is so that it doesn't break the yarn that in the weave when you're sewing. Instead, the very acute round point will move the thread or yarn out of the way instead of breaking it. Another type of needle within the same classification system is an abbreviation SES, and this means light ballpoint. It's a light ballpoint needle, which means this should be used for lightweight knit fabrics. It still has the 80/12 size, but this needle is made specially for lightweight knit fabrics. You should not use this on woven fabrics. Another needle in the same classification is SUK. This is a medium ballpoint needle, and of course you're going to use this when you're using medium to more medium heavyweight knit fabrics. It has a rounded point just like the SES, but you're not going to use this on woven fabrics. Again, it still has the same sizing system, but it's meant for knit fabrics. Now I want you to understand something about these different types, SPI, SES, SUK. Your dealers may not know the difference between these abbreviations. You need to know this because you need to be sewing with the correct needle. So my needles are the needles that don't have any abbreviations after the letters, just like here on the ones that I've purchased. These are considered sharps, sharp needles. They have a sharp point. They will pierce the fabric. They're meant for a medium weight, maybe slightly more than medium weight fabric, and this will pierce the fabric. And these are the needles we will be using when we sew with cotton, medium weight cotton woven fabric. And these are the needles you need to be using. If your dealer gives you anything that has SPI, SES, or SUK in it, and you're not going to be sewing on knit fabrics, you need to say, no, I'm sorry, I need something without the abbreviations. You need sharps. Using the correct bobbin in your machine is very important to your quality of sewing and to your machine health. You will need to refer to your machine's operation manual for the specific type of bobbin you must use in your machine. There are several different types of bobbins, so don't be fooled by bobbins that look alike. It is very common that bobbins are not interchangeable between sewing machine brands. If you are not using the correct bobbin, you may encounter breaking needles, wadding thread, and inconsistent sewing. Here are a few different types of bobbins. Some are metal and some are plastic. They all look similar and perform the same duty, but they're different in size and statures. I've had several different types of machines, and so that's why I have so many different types of bobbins here. So this one here is for the brother machine I'll be using in all of the video projects for the home sewing. These bobbins here are for my industrial machine. You will also need to consult your industrial dealer to figure out what types of bobbins are needed for your machine. These are also usually not interchangeable. Additionally, for the industrial sewing machine, you're going to need a bobbin case. This will also be specific to the brand and the style of machine that you're using. So you'll need to consult wherever you bought your industrial machine which bobbin case and which bobbins work the best in your machine. For the home sewers, you'll need to look at your operation manual. In my case, this bobbin came with the machine. Usually you get a few bobbins with the machine when you buy it. In your sewing machine manual for the home users, there should be a page that actually explains the bobbin types you should be using, the part number or a measurement. On my page, it actually has a specific part code, which is SA156. There is also a measurement given, which is 11.5 millimeters width between the top and the bottom of the bobbin. If I search the internet for this specific bobbin part code, the result I get are Brother brand bobbins. However, when you go to the fabric store, they may not carry Brother brand bobbins or your brand of bobbin that you use. And to make things more confusing, the bobbins at the store that you purchase may not even say that they're compatible with a specific part code. They'll just say that it's compatible with a sewing machine. But understand that bobbins could be different between different machine types of the same brand. So make sure that you're using the correct bobbin by looking in your manual to check for the bobbin size or class code. When I'm shopping for bobbins at the store, I usually always take one of the bobbins with me. So I know sometimes you can forget. My suggestion is if you're unsure, don't purchase until you take a bobbin with you. Line it up with the bobbins in the case to be sure that you're getting the right size bobbin. If you're not using the right size bobbin in your machine, again, you could damage your machine, you will have thread problems, and you won't get a good stitch. Just like needles, there are many types and sizes of thread. The thread size or weight of thread you choose should relate to your needle size, and of course, your needle size choice relates back to the fabric you chose. So typically, the thread weight should only be about 40 or 50% of the size of the needle eye. To test your thread for the appropriate size, thread the needle through the eye and hold the thread at either end away from the needle. Spin the needle around the thread, then pull the thread tight and tilt the head at an angle If the thread easily slides down the thread, your thread should be a good fit for the needle. However, be sure that the thread is not too thin. If your thread is too thin, then it may break or skip stitches as you sew, as well as pucker the seam. Thread that is too heavy will not thread through the hole. So what should you look for when you're at the fabric store? There are a couple of brands that will usually be on hand. Coats & Clark is one of the most visible thread companies in America, although they are originally a Scottish company. For our purposes, since we're only going to be working with medium weight fabrics, look for Dual Duty XP All-Purpose. This is a 100% polyester thread. It's a strong thread and the weight is perfect for the 80/12 needle size. Gutermann is another well-known brand you may see at the fabric store. While there isn't a lot of information on the spool itself, their specialty threads will be printed on the spool, such as top stitch, denim, extra long, etc. Their sew all thread doesn't seem to have any markings on the spool. However, check the display at the store where you select the thread. It should say sew all at the top of the display. This thread is also 100% polyester, strong, and will fit well into the needle. You may encounter threads on large cones like this one. Read the labeling carefully. This particular cone says for overlock machines. An overlock machine is the same as a serger, which we'll get into in more advanced lessons. Even though it says for overlock machines, you could use this in your sewing machine, but be aware that the size of the thread may not be consistent, which can cause irregular seam stitching. If you live in an area where there is apparel manufacturing and you can visit a large thread supplier, you will not only be exposed to thousands of thread options, but you'll also experience sticker shock. Not because of the prices, but because of the language on the sticker inside the cone. There will be a lot of different numbers and abbreviations which can be very intimidating, but don't worry, you don't need to be concerned with most of it. Let's have a look at these stickers. Here's a sticker I removed from one of the cones. There's a lot of information on here, but we really don't need to be worried about too much of it. What we're going to be looking for is the letter T, or more commonly, the word TEX, T-E-X. This one here, I have TEX 27. This is the size of the thread. Later, in more advanced lessons, I'll discuss more involved what TEX really means. So, TEX 26 and TEX 27 is a pretty common in the apparel industry. That's for basically a medium weight fabric. These sizes are comparable to Coats & Clark Dual Duty XP and the Gutermann Sew All threads. TEX 40 is a bit larger than normal, but is quite common in the quilting community and will work in your needle if you can't find TEX 26 or TEX 27. Now, of course, there's tons more about thread I could educate you with, but I don't want to make you nervous about learning to sew. So I'm just giving you the most important and the basic information you'll need to get started. If you're more interested in fibers, yarns, and threads, check out Coats & Clark and Gutermann websites. They have a lot of information about their processes. Also, my favorite website, American and Eford, have a lot of educational downloads about fibers, yarn, and thread. Check out their technical tools drop-down menu.